Hello everybody. In this video I will be talking about part 4, which is about Genderlects. More specifically, I will be discussing these 4 articles. 4.2 I will do the first half and Jana will discuss the second half. So the last 2 articles are about email. And firstly, we will start with 2 chapters from the book You Just Don't Understand, which is written by Deborah Tannen. And in the first chapter, she explains that men and women are using different words because they live in different worlds. So there are differences in how men and women engage the world. Men, on the one hand, engage the world as an individual in a hierarchical social order. In that order, they are either one up or one down. So conversations are negotiations in which they try to achieve and maintain the upper hand, while they also protect themselves from others' attempts to put them down. So in that scenario, life is a contest in which men struggle to preserve independence and also avoid failure. On the other hand, we have women. Women approach the world as an individual in a network of connections. Conversations then are negotiations for closeness, in which people try to seek and give confirmation and support, in which they try to reach consensus and protect themselves from other people's attempts to push them away. In that scenario, life is a community in which people struggle to preserve intimacy and avoid isolation. So independence is key in a world of status. And status is established by giving orders to other people. So the person who is giving the orders will be superior, while taking orders puts you in a lower status. Intimacy is key in a world of connection where individuals minimize risk and try to avoid appearance of superiority. So the opposite of status, basically, because that would highlight the differences that there are. So those are the goals that each gender is really focused on, although they are of course still concerned with the other type of goals as well. For instance, women will also be concerned with status and avoiding failure, but they are not as focused on it as men will be. So all humans need both sides. They need both intimacy and independence, but women tend to focus on intimacy more and men tend to focus on independence more. An example of this situation is seen in relationships where the husband very often does not want to consult his wife, for instance, on buying something, while the wife does want to be consulted. Now, the man does not want to do this because he sees asking permission as putting himself in a lower status, while a wife wants to be consulted, because it will put her in the picture. It will show her that her husband is thinking about her, and that for her perspective, he is focusing on the relationship. So their communication is actually a continual balancing act. Women want to communicate, they want to talk, so they feel like they are in the picture because they focus on the relationship and the connection, while men only communicate to make decisions and to give or take orders. Finally, to this list we can also add 2 more aspects: asymmetry and symmetry. So if intimacy means connection and we are close and the same, this can be linked to symmetry. While on the other hand, independence and status means we're separate and we're different because we have a different status. And this implies, of course, asymmetry. Because of this reason, for instance, men will feel very uncomfortable in situations where their lower position in a hierarchy is emphasized. For that reason, they don't like asking questions to a boss, and they don't like to obey orders from people who are superior. And for instance, there's the example of a man asking his wife not to order him around while his friends are in the house. A second important topic in this chapter is framing. So, meta messages frame a conversation. They provide a context and let you know how to interpret what someone is saying. This interpretation depends on how things are said and done, how comments are worded, the tone of voice and facial expressions and gestures that are used. All those things determine the impression that is made. There are signals that send out meta messages about the communication. Our reactions to what other people are saying and doing are often sparked by how we feel that we are being framed, so we interpret those meta messages. And for instance, imagine if somebody is speaking to you as if you were the teacher or as if you were the student. This, of course, will cause different reactions from you. This is an important topic in this chapter because expressions can be interpreted in two ways. They could be interpreted symmetrically or asymmetrically. And of course, women tend to use the symmetrical interpretation while men choose the asymmetrical interpretation. So there are various situations and examples in which this becomes clear. For instance, expressions of sympathy and concern could be ambiguous. They can be interpreted symmetrically. In that case, they are evidence of fellow feeling of among equals, a fellow feeling among equals. So then it would be an expression of human connections by a person who understands, who cares. But the expression of sympathy or concern could also be interpreted asymmetrically. And then this expression would be offered by someone who is one up to someone who is one down, reminding the person who is one down of his or her weakness. So it would put the person making the expression, putting this person in a superior place. Imagine somebody asking a person who is unemployed if he or she has already found a job. This could be interpreted symmetrically, like a question into the well-being of this person because you are worried that they are taking care of themselves, etc. But it could also be interpreted asymmetrically. So a person asking this to put emphasis on the weakness and blaming this person for not finding a job because, well, he is weak or he is not smart enough. So this paradox or this ambiguity also applies for helping. The act of helping also sends out meta messages, and those meta messages can be interpreted differently. If they're interpreted symmetrically, helping is seen as a generous move that shows caring and builds rapport. So you're focused on the connection in that case. But of course, there's also the asymmetrical approach, and then offering help puts the person in a superior position with respect to the person who needs the help. Then the meta message from the person helping would be, I am more competent than you. Then there's also a problem with chivalry. So if a man is holding the door for a woman or lets a woman pass in traffic, if he makes a generous a move of chivalry, a gesture of chivalry, she will most likely thank him, she will accept it, she will thank him, because she sees it from a symmetrical perspective, so then it would be a nice thing to do. However, the man's perspective shows him that the person who is being chivalrous is superior because he is in control of the situation and he offers somebody else a nice move. He allows somebody else to pass, for instance. So if a man would receive such a gesture of chivalry, he will most likely not accept it because he does not want to be put in that lower status where he is not in control of his own actions because somebody else is deciding if he is allowed to pass or not. Finally, there's also ambiguity in protective gestures. Again, for women, a protective gesture is most likely seen as nicety, as a person, well, being nice to them, because they focus on connection and relationship. But for men, again, the person who is being protective, is being the protector, is a superior person. They are dominant to the one who needs protection. And the problem here is that status difference is more immediately apparent to men, and as a result, women who think in terms of connection may talk or behave in ways that accept this protection, while they are unaware that the other party, often men, may see them as taking a subordinate position. So although women don't want to accept this lower position, by accepting this protective gesture, they will take this subordinate position in the eyes of a man. Status and connection can be two approaches, two means to get the same things done. If you are using status, you have the choice between one up or one down. If you focus on one up, you try to show why you are superior and what benefits you can offer the other person. If you are one down, you can show that you need help of the other person, so you will be putting yourself in a vulnerable position. If you're focusing on connection, you will most likely try to reinforce your sameness. So then you would focus on what you have in common to create a personal connection. Something that might remind us of the Book of Diamond, Stuart Diamond. Very often, if a person is focused on one of those two approaches, the other approach might seem manipulative, deceptive. But Tannen reassures us that both stages and connections are ways of being involved with others. Both elements are always present in a conversation, and that's the reason why it's so easy for women to focus on elements of connection, while men focus on elements of status in the exact same conversation. As a result, men and women can have opposite interpretations of the same action. Then, because of those two different approaches, there could also be mixed judgments and misjudgments. So it is said that we can understand the other party, the other gender, intellectually, but there is no emotional resonance with the reasoning of the other. So, for instance, women often think they are displaying a positive quality by focusing on the relationship, but that is misjudged by men who perceive it as revealing a lack of independence. So if a woman asks for help or just asks a question to a man because she wants to nurture the relationship. In the eyes of the man, this shows that she's incompetent or she's insecure, showing that there's a lack of independence, putting her in a lower status. So, the reasoning of 10 is that male-female conversations are like cross-cultural communication because there is a clash of conversational styles. There are two different genderlects. We have the male language of status and independence, and on the other hand we have the female language of connection and intimacy. And when these two languages interact, there can occur misjudgments and miscommunications. But where do women and men learn these different ways of speaking and hearing? It already starts at the beginning. Girls and boys grow up in different worlds of words, it is said. Even if they grow up in the same house, others talk to them differently. People expect different ways of talking from them, and they don't only learn to talk from their parents, but also from their peers. So, boys and girls have different ways of talking to their friends, and they will also very often spend most of their time playing in same-sex groups. So there is not a lot of contact with the other kind of talking. And also the games in these same-sex groups are different, and the use of language in these games is different. So boys, for instance, play in large hierarchical structured groups. Think about football. So there is a leader who tells others what to do and who resists what other boys are proposing. And boys have games with winners and losers, as well as with elaborate systems of rules which could be elaborately discussed. They also boast their skills and often argue who is best at what. Girls on the other hand, will play in small groups or in pairs, in which intimacy is key. So very often the center of a girl's life is a best friend, one best friend. Their games are also very often without winners or losers, and everybody just gets a turn. Think about rope skipping or about playing house. However, there is an interesting side note with the game of playing house. Because in this game there are hierarchical structures, since the mothers are the leaders of the children and the children have to listen to the mothers. So this shows that girls know how to issue orders and operate in a hierarchical structure, but they don't find that mode of behavior appropriate when they engage with peers. They do find it appropriate, however, in parent-children relationships. Furthermore, girls are not expected to boast their skills. They also express preferences as suggestions, not as orders, which should be accepted. And they will also sit together and talk instead of challenge each other and grab center stage by telling stories or jokes. So girls will monitor their friendships for subtle shifts in alliance. And they very often also try to be friends with the popular girls. Girls are mostly concerned with being liked. Boys, on the other hand, monitor their relationships for subtle shifts in status by keeping track of who is giving orders to whom. In case of conflict, if boys and girls want to get something, they do it in different ways. So boys will be insistent and they will focus on the rules and even use threats. However, this does not mean that they do not attempt to compromise, but it is more compromise is more used in girl conflicts. So girls are more focused on preserving harmony by trying compromise or evasion. The key of this whole chapter basically is understanding. Each conversational style is valid on its own terms, but misunderstandings arise because these styles are so different. If we then take a cross-cultural approach, this will help us learn more about the differences in style and make it possible to explain why dissatisfactions are justified. Studying the differences won't make these differences go away, but understanding why others behave in a certain way will be a comfort to us, and having others understand why we talk and behave in a certain way will protect us from the pain of their puzzlement and criticism because they don't understand us. So, if understanding increases, there will be a decrease of the complaint you just don't understand. We can now continue with the second chapter from the book, and this is called Asymmetries, and it's about women and men talking at cross purposes. So, women and men are often frustrated by the other's way of responding to their expressions of troubles, and then they are further hurt by the other's frustration to their frustration. So, men and women have different ways of responding in trouble talk, and when they are talking to each other, so not to the same gender, the problem is that each expects a different kind of response. So women want understanding, they want that somebody else offers them a match in trouble, while men, if somebody else is talking about troubles, offer advice, offer solutions. They want to get it out of the way. So this causes discord. If a man is talking about trouble, what he expects and what of course another man would do is try to solve the problem because they're problem solvers. But more likely what's to happen if two men are talking about troubles is that the second man will talk about his own troubles and dismiss the other's troubles as insignificant, so they absolutely don't show understanding. What men do is that they seek to alleviate feelings indirectly by attacking their cause. On the other hand, what women want is understanding. So women want to talk about their problems. It's the meta message that counts. They are asking for understanding or a similar complaint. So, to focus on the symmetry. So, a woman, in reaction to somebody talking about troubles, will try to confirm the feelings of the other person and try to match experience and reinforce the similarity. And even try to encourage the other person to tell more. So women expect to have their feelings supported. However, they feel attacked by the men's approach, which is the opposite of showing understanding and being supportive. What a man very often will say to a woman talking about troubles is, "I'll fix it for you." But this causes the woman to be frustrated because they don't want solutions, they just want to talk about the problem. An exception to this rule is help with fixing some mechanical equipment. Then women do accept help. But if it's about emotional troubles or something else, they don't want men to help them. And then in return, men will resent women's refusal to take action to solve certain problems that they complain about. What a man could also do is change the subject to respect the need for independence of the other person. But of course, this is seen from the status perspective, while women see changing the subject as a lack of sympathy and intimacy. And a final thing that men could do that also frustrates women is saying that their situation is not so bleak and that the problem is not that terrible. But what women hear is that their feelings are being belittled. So in that scenario, the woman feels like she's put in a subordinate position. So in that case, there will be asymmetry, while women actually want symmetrical communication. So the opposite can happen when a man complains about troubles and a woman is reacting. So what the woman will do is show understanding and try to come up with similar troubles of her own, but this frustrates men because to them it takes away the uniqueness of their experience, and that makes them feel belittled. So they see the world from a status perspective, meaning that if they're belittled, they are put in a subordinate position once again. So here the quote, "They're my troubles, not yours," is very accurate. Men don't want somebody else to have the same troubles as them. We can also come back to this thing that men do talk about their own troubles but dismiss others as insignificant. So if you see this separately, it looks like it's asymmetrical, but if we look at the conversation as a whole, it's actually symmetrical. So the first man puts himself in a subordinate position by talking about a problem that he has, and he gives the other man the possibility to give advice, to show sympathy, all these things that will put him in a superior position. However, if the second man talks about his own troubles, brings up own problems that he has, and dismisses the others as insignificant, by doing this, he declines to take a superior position. So the meta message in such a conversation is actually, we're just a couple of guys trying to make it in a world that's tough on both of us, and both of us are about equally competent to deal with it. There are not only troubles with talking about troubles, but also with asking for information. So men don't want to ask information, for instance, ask directions, because it makes them feel uncomfortable, not independent, while they actually want to be self-sufficient. This is because the person who has information is superior to the one who has to ask about information. However, if a person is asked for information and he or she can't give it, then again that is putting that person in a lower status and humiliating to men. Also, there is asymmetry in having or demonstrating skill to fix things. And Tennant speaks of a social contract of asking help and showing appreciation. So women feel comfortable and honor-bound to seek help, to accept it, and to display gratitude and show appreciation, give praise, and all of that. While men feel honor-bound to fulfill the request for help, and even if that's not convenient to them at the time, and they feel bound to invest the time and effort that they might not be able to spare in reality. So having expertise and skill can reinforce both women's and the men's sense of themselves. but stance of expert is more fundamental to masculinity than femininity. So women are expected to praise, to give compliments, and to be nice, while men are expected to be givers of information. So, and giving praise or giving information are both asymmetrical because they frame the speaker as superior. Then there is also a different meaning of giving help. So a woman asking for help when dealing with computers or automobiles or mechanical equipment will be helped differently by a man than by a woman, because they have different meanings of giving help. Women focus on connection, so they are motivated to minimize differences in expertise, and they try to be as comprehensible as possible, because the goal here is maintaining the appearance of similarity and equal status. So sharing knowledge will help even the score. They feel more powerful when they can be of help and when the community is strong. On the other hand, men focus on status. So to them, it would feel more comfortable to have the upper hand, and having more information, more knowledge, or more skill puts the man in a superior position, and that comes through in his way of talking. Not trying to be comprehensible is because their pleasant feeling of knowing more is reinforced when the student does not understand. Less knowledge is a bigger margin of superiority in the eyes of men. So when there is this woman asking for help, the woman helping her will try to be patient and trying to give a clear explanation without judgment, and she will try to make the student feel competent, while men, on the other hand, are more likely to humiliate the student and make them feel incompetent by using difficult terminology, for instance, or by giving a quick explanation. So men and women have different goals when they're helping, and this can cause misjudgments of intentions. So when men try to fix things, they want to reinforce their own feeling of being in control, of being self-sufficient, of being able to dominate the world of objects. Many men also take special pleasure in showing their strength over the world for the benefit of an attractive woman, because the thanks and the admiration is an added source of pleasure and satisfaction. Women, on the other hand, think the motivation of a man is just to help them. They see it as a nice gesture. So elements of the negotiating status So the elements of status and connection coexist, but there are tendencies to place different relative weights on status versus connection, which results in asymmetrical roles. So men are most likely only feeling comfortable giving information because that puts them in a superior situation. But women would feel comfortable with both receiving and giving information because they don't see the world from a status perspective. Continuing with the second text, we can read that differences in conversational styles also cause misunderstandings on the workflow. So in general, workplaces that have previously had men in positions of power have already established male-style interactions as the norm. So women who have other different styles of communicating are not starting out equal. They're in a disadvantage. So there are situations when asking questions is necessary and not asking questions would even be dangerous. However, men don't want to ask directions or information in general because they feel like it will put them in a subordinate position. But in situations of life and death, for instance, when it's about healthcare professionals or airline pilots, men do need to ask questions if they're uncertain about something. So the moral is actually flexibility, not change. Sticking to habit in the face of all challenges is not so smart if it ends up getting you or somebody else killed. Therefore, we need to understand our own style and know its limits and alternatives. So, men don't necessarily have to change. They don't have to start asking questions all the time. But if they're in a risky situation, which is a matter of life and death, they do need to know that then they should ask questions. However, we've seen now that not asking questions can have disastrous consequences in a medical setting or with pilots, but asking questions can also have negative consequences in a professional setting because men see questions as evidence of weakness, of incompetence. It will put the person asking questions in a lower position. Women, on the other hand, don't see a problem with asking questions and are unaware that they make a negative impression at the same time that they get information. So, in this specific case, women are actually more focused on information while men are more focused on interaction, which is the opposite of the stereotype. There are two different ways of negotiating. Making decisions is a crucial part of any workday, and often they must be made with not enough information or time. And when people are trying to reach decisions, there are different ways of doing this, and none is clearly better than the other. But when two people with different styles have to make decisions together, both styles may have worse results than either would have if their styles were shared. So, two opposing styles is worse than people with similar styles discussing together. Of course, unless that these differences are understood and accommodated. So the inside-out style of negotiating starts with what the speaker wants. He states what he wants or what he will do, and if the other person wants to talk or has anything to say about it or has different ideas, the speaker expects the other person to say so, and then the negotiation will start. The outside-in style of negotiation starts with vague questions to ask about the opinions of others. And then the negotiation can start. So to the inside outers, the vague questions are more like invitations to decide, while to outside inners, the specific claims that the other style makes are actually non-negotiable demands, but actually they are negotiable. And then finally, there's a chapter on when the wage gap when is the wage gap a communication gap. So there are various factors that can cause a salary gap, and this includes the ways of speaking, since anything you get depends on talking. But some might also have a not logically thought out sense that women should get less, maybe because they are expected to have lower abilities, because they do not display their abilities, or because their rank and salaries are being measured against those of other women rather than their male peers who have the same position in the company. And finally, there may even be an unarticulated sense that women need less because they're not seen as breadwinners. So there could be a range of factors causing this wage gap. Text 4.6 is an online article from 2007 stating that women's fluffy personal email style loses them respect because it's not businesslike enough. So there are emails written by men, and they are precise, to the point. Men don't want to use social niceties or don't focus on socio-emotional aspects of communication. This makes their emails quick, sharp, and almost aggressive. On the other hand, we have women, and women mirror their usual communication patterns. So they write, as is called in the article, she-mails. Women dare to ask personal questions before dealing with the real point. They also use confirmation tag questions. For instance, don't you agree, or isn't that right? Furthermore, they overuse self-disclosure and I statements. They take time to tailor emails to recipients. And all these things create long, chatty emails. And there are problems with that in a business situation. First of all, they are seen as a waste of time. So email is perfect for rapidly distributing nuggets of information, as it is worded in the article. And the removal of normal social cues allows for pared down, more efficient communication. So email is actually more similar to the male tendency of communication. The problem with long chatty emails then is that you won't be taken seriously, because the message should actually be very clear and, well, short. So in conclusion, the article advises women to sharpen their style if they want to get ahead. The last text that I will be discussing in this video is 4.7, which is once again about the email gender gap. So the topic of this scientific article is the gender differences in email by focusing on the text-based attributes of email messages. So it is said that email erodes social cues in communication processes due to the absence of social context cues. As a consequence, the gender inequalities are significantly reduced in email communication. However, the main argument of this article is that gender cues emerge in text-based email messages and that it is important to take this into account when assessing the level of richness embedded in email communication. So they assume that there is an organizational context that intertwines with email message texts. So the information richness theory says that organization participants select communication media depending on their information requirements, that is, ambiguity and uncertainty. Ambiguity and uncertainty reduction is a function of a medium's capability to achieve information richness. That richness is the ability of information to change understanding within a time interval. So communication media can vary in the level of information richness they process depending on their capacity for immediate feedback, the number of cues and channels they use, personalization, and language variety. So for instance, the media classification in decreasing richness is face-to-face, then telephone, then personal documents, impersonal written documents, and lastly, numeric documents. This means that email, which is written and asynchronous, is a lean medium instead of a rich medium, according to the information richness theory. Being a lean medium, it would mean that email is unable to signal meaning beyond the explicit message that it carries. However, this view has been criticized because email can carry more meaning than the explicit message. For instance, Schmitz and Fulk say that email richness varies across individuals and co-varies with relational social influences and with media experience factors. This is the opposite of the richness theory, saying that richness is a relative objective feature inherent in the medium. There is also Lee, who says that email itself is not a rich medium, but the meanings given to email messages contribute to its richness. So this would mean that information richness is not a function of the communication medium, but that the information richness is a function of the interaction between communication or between the communication medium and the organizational context in which the medium is used. So if we are going to look at email, we can see that it has various characteristics. It is like written communication because there is time to structure the message, making the text appear more planned and consequential. However, there are also oral characteristics, so email sometimes also resembles conversational speech. Very often it is spontaneously written, it is brief, and there might occur typographical or grammatical errors. And thirdly, email does also have some unique characteristics that only apply in email communication. Think about emoticons. So email can give opportunity for the appearance of both verbal and non-verbal attributes in messages, as well as the evolution of a new language and textual patterns among users. All this means that email is actually a unique medium with characteristics that are not found in other media. The theory of information richness has overlooked all those characteristics of email communication and has wrongly classified email as a lean medium, while actually it is much richer. Therefore, this article argues that there is a need to focus on text-based nature of email messages. And this article will start with text-based gender cues in email messages. So there are various authors, scientists that already found some differences between male and female emails. For instance, women tend to use more features that are associated with maintenance of rapport and intimacy. Females are also often perceived to be authors of more polite and more grammatically correct emails. And their messages are also more personal and more friendly. For instance, they tend to address and greet the recipient while avoiding using their own signature. So they want to emphasize the status of the other person while they don't emphasize their own status. The opposite happens when men write emails, so they do add their signature to reinforce their own status. And this is of course linked with what we've already seen in Deborah Tennant's work. The present study adds that women write emails that are more structured, more formal, and show more careful composition. So there are paragraphs, there are lists, while men tend to write short, unstructured, more spontaneous, and to the point messages. Also, women will try to be informative, while men are more likely to be directive. So in style, however, women are more conversational because they add longer women are more conversational in style because they write those longer, more detailed emails and they add social questions, something that then again does not happen in male emails. In conclusion, we could say that email does signal gender differences instead of alleviating them, meaning that there is evidence that email is not just a lean medium but actually a rich medium. The authors show that there is a need to rethink the concept of richness in email and to develop more appropriate tools for measuring information richness, because, as this article has shown, the information richness theory is not accurate. The article finishes with some recommendations both for women and for men, which you can read on the PowerPoint slide.